All right. Good morning. It is Monday, March 27th, 2023. The House and Senate are in session this week, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Since we last spoke, the grain deal between Russia and Ukraine was extended. The banking debacle threatened to spread. Severe weather in the south, more rains in the west, and winter returned to the Midwest. And on a happier note, kind of a strange note, but a happier note, the Final Four for the men headed to Houston. UConn's going to play Miami. Florida Atlantic will play San Diego State. For the women, we know that LSU and Iowa are headed to Dallas. Two more teams will join the Final Four tonight. Welcome to you all. Glad that you're with us. I am AgriTalk host Chip Flory, and that is Pro Farmer Policy Analyst Jim Wiesemeyer. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Chip. And I note that Ukraine grain pack was extended for only 60 days. So
Yep.
The reports quoting 120 days were off.
Yep, that is number one on my list of things that I wanted to cover. Why just 60 days?
Well, that takes them right before Ukraine's harvest, which is, leverage and Putin. That's probably primary, Chip, but he wants some changes in it, and he's flexing some muscles there.
Right. Do you think there, based on some of the comments that we've received from Putin, do you think there's going to be another extension?
Some people don't think so, that I respect. So that's a viable question.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen this next time, Jim, and it seems like 60 days is a step down to nothing. He definitely, his attitude changed again after President Xi, Chinese President Xi, left after they met, and he almost comes off as emboldened. He comes off as if without an official trade agreement, they struck some kind of an agreement that is going to keep Russian and probably Ukrainian grain flowing into China in exchange for China's support of what Russia is doing.
And humanitarian, in the case of Russia, to some countries on the grain. So that's the yin and yang of Putin, Chip. So it looks like that could well be the strategy. And of course, it makes his wheat go higher priced, right? In Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, there was when the quote, I think, of the weekend was when Xi departed Moscow, and he told Putin, right now there are changes, the likes of which we haven't seen for 100 years, and we're the ones driving these changes together. And then Putin said, I agree. And he said, take care, please, dear friend. Have a safe trip. You're seeing them get closer and closer. And it looks like when you look around the world, countries are picking sides.
Yep. This is, picking sides is one way to say it. But what they both see, just so that we're perfectly clear on this, they both see the fall of Western Europe and the West, the United States, is what they both anticipate, correct?
Yeah, they seek it.
Yeah.
They seek it, and they're going after allies like, continued allies like Iran, portions of the Middle East, now South America. So you're seeing they're going right into our southern hemisphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, there is a comments tab someplace on your tab. On your page. We've already got Melody and Gary are in there, and they've got some questions for us. We'll try to answer them. No guarantees, but I will guarantee that Jim will look into it if we don't have an answer. Let's start with the one from Melody here. Will recent geopolitical events intercede with China's purchase of 68% of our grain exports? Well, China has really stepped up its purchases of U.S. corn here, just over 2.7 million metric tons over the past 2 weeks. I don't know if it's going to slow anything down there or not, because they've got people and they need the feed. Their hog herd came back in. The latest measure of their hog herd showed that the sow herd got bigger than what they had planned. It's up like 5% from a year ago. So they need feed again, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing them buying as much corn as they are, Jim.
Yes. Yeah. And it suggests perhaps maybe a downturn a bit in their soybean imports, Chip, relative to their hog market, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would need less,
Yeah.
need more corn. As far as the overall U.S. export situation in China, yeah, we better have a strategy for the years ahead because of not only this, but of the Taiwan issue.
Yeah.
And USDA's Economic Research Service came out with a report that I may write about in Ag Letter this week. It said the U.S. lost its place as the world's largest wheat exporter a decade ago, and that was to Russia. Now its leadership in exports of corn, cotton, and tree nuts is being challenged.
Yeah.
That we're seeing big trend changes here, Chip.
Oh, absolutely. We certainly are. Comment here from Gary. Gary says Kenya just made a deal with Saudi Arabia to buy oil in their currency, adding to the number of countries, the BRICS, dumping the dollar. Is it a question of when, not if?
Well, see, that Africa and other nations are doing this, and this goes in with the picking sides, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's going to replace the dollar, but it's going to nick the dollar. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Okay. You know what, Gary? I will. You gave me a great idea last week, Gary, and I followed up with that. We will. I've got a couple of ideas of people that I would like to get on to talk about the dollar as the default currency, and we'll get that done sometime this week. If not this week, early next week. Okay, let's stay on trade here for a second, because a GOP lawmaker made a comment on Friday about U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai, and the comment that he made, it's almost I don't know if it's a backhanded compliment or a backhanded insult, Jim. I don't know, but he wondered if she's just too nice.
Yeah, I don't think it was an insult, but you just never know. Greg Murphy, Republican from North Carolina, he began by saying that Tai was very highly spoken of, but then added he thought that she was too nice a person for the job you're in. He said, usually looking in the past, they were not the nicest of people. Right. So, and she eventually struck back because he said, she said, I've never been faulted for being, quote, too nice. You don't need to feel sorry for me. I don't need your pity. Yeah. And then she said, let me just take off the nice a little bit. I stand up for the American people. This is a quote. When I speak, people listen because I represent the interest of the U.S. So it was an interesting exchange, no doubt about it. But it shows, let's go, the reasons for it, I think, Chip. It's the frustration with the Biden trade policy, especially as it pertains to agriculture. You hear that from not only Republicans, but from Democrats. They want a more traditional market access, talking about the high tariffs in a number of countries. They see China going around the world and lowering their tariffs to buy other countries' imports, and we're laying on the side. When Tai addressed that Thursday last week in front of the Senate Finance Committee, she basically acknowledged, agriculture has a lot to gain from that, but other sectors of the U.S. business does not. That was revealing.
Certainly. I would like to see some progress made in maybe hang up a shingle that says, hey, the U.S. is open for trade. Don't forget, Don't forget
Yes.
that the U.S. is open for trade. Uh, just on the willingness to participate in trade agreements and so on. But it's what you guys were talking about on Friday on AgriTalk on the free for all, the conversation that it was basically between you and Sean Haney. That's not in that doesn't seem to be in this administration's DNA. The idea of going after trade agreements on an individual basis, it just
Yes.
doesn't seem likely.
Just a different approach.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong in this, but you're seeing it unfold, just a far different
Yeah.
structure of it.
Right.
But for the agriculture side, it's not all negative. This is why you have your commodity groups do export market promotion. And in most cases, these commodity groups do a very good job.
Yeah.
Chips, soybeans, the meat sector,
Yep.
etc. I applaud them. Farm Bureau is also very good under export market development.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. A couple of other things over the weekend. Probably should have used this one right at the very start, but I wanted to go to last week's issues first. Over the weekend, 24 tornadoes since Friday, Jim. 26 people killed.
At least.
At least. More, many more injured. There is more severe weather in the forecast for the South for the second half of this week. They did a great job providing some warnings at the start of last week about what could happen at the end of last week, and it happened. The other thing, the atmospheric river out west continues to dump rain, heavy snow into California, and I even hate to mention this, but we had 6 or 8 inches of snow yesterday. Winter came back to the Midwest.
Wow.
It's really a strange time as we're making that transition from La Nina to El Nino. Should with at least a brief stop at Enso neutral between the two, but boy, here we are in the middle of it.
Yeah, in Mississippi, Chip, that's the
Yeah.
largest death toll from a tornado in that state in more than 5 decades. So
Yeah.
that's of note.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, other weekend happenings. We need to go back to Russia and President Putin. He announced plans to put nuclear weapons in Belarus.
Yeah, and he said it was in reaction to the British supplying Ukraine with depleted uranium munitions. So tit for tat. But it's just high anxiety. You also noted the U.S. has nuclear weapons are options in other countries of the world. So again, it's Putin's tit for tat.
Okay. The banking debacle seems to have lost some of the urgency over the weekend. First Citizens agreed last night to buy most of Silicon Valley. And First Citizens evidently is pretty good at doing this.
Yeah, they have a history of digesting, banks, acquiring over 20 firms since 2009, Chip. So, pretty good track record there.
Absolutely. Mexican president, no, excuse me, not Mexican president, I'm sorry. Brazilian president Lula canceled his trip to China over the weekend. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, he had influenza. They're saying he personally canceled the trip, and he was going to take at least 69 meat exporter officials over there with him. But the goal is clear. He's in China's camp, and he wants to improve the trade policy relationships between Brazil and China. And on Pro Farmer this morning, we run a Bloomberg chart showing how that trade is increasing. Brazil exports to China big time.
Yeah. And again, referring back to Friday's free for all with you and Haney and Mark Recker, China restarted imports of Brazilian beef. And this is like 30 days after the discovery or the announcement that that Brazil had another atypical case of BSE. Canada's still trying to get back into China's beef market 15 months
Yes.
after an atypical case. So, boy, this is definitely a case of who you know matters.
All foreign policy all the time when it comes to
Yeah,
China. Yeah,
yeah.
that's part of their grand strategy. Now, if they needed Canadian beef,
Be
they would
buying it.
free it up.
Yep.
That's classic China trade policy.
Yep. Okay. Okay. This week, the week ahead, it's ahead of a 2-week Easter recess for both the House and the Senate. Do the lawmakers kind of hit another gear this week heading into that break?
Well, they're going to hear a lot from the cabinet members of the Biden administration, including Secretary Vilsack at USDA 3 times, Chip.
Okay.
Tuesday before the House Ag panel, and then Wednesday and Thursday respectively, before the Senate and House Ag Appropriations Committees. And we all know that when Vilsack goes to the Hill, he uncorks usually several announcements, either
Yeah.
updates on programs, etc. So we could get an avalanche, and but we're going to have other officials from the Biden administration, a host of them this week, trying to defend their request for fiscal year 2024. Chip.
Okay. EPA, I probably should have done this in the last week segment of the conversation here, but last week, EPA Administrator Michael Regan was on Capitol Hill defending the budget. Primarily was the big reason that he was there, even though the Inflation Reduction Act provided billions on billions additional funding for EPA, and Administrator Regan had to defend WOTUS again.
Yeah, especially even from some Democrats, not many, but why did you do this? Basically put out a rule, last December, ahead of the coming Supreme Court ruling on waters of the U.S. on the definition, no later than June of this year.
Right. So the Senate this week, well, the House recently passed a piece of legislation that would undo the Biden administration's definitions of the wetlands, right?
Yeah, under the Congressional Review Act, and that just allows Congress to reject new executive branch rules. But we had a court case last week that stopped the new WOTUS rule from only 2 states, Idaho and Texas, and there's a
Right.
number of them pending, Chip. But bottom line, the Senate may take up the resolution this week. By no means it's a certainty they'll pass it, but even if they were, Biden has already said he'd veto, and a look at the votes will clearly show they don't have enough to override.
Okay.
But it's Congress trying to tell the administration and EPA that they're watching. But this thing's going to go until hopefully we get clarity rather than more muddiness from the Supreme Court on this issue, Jeff.
Right. The what is going to be, how quickly do you think that this is going to move, the whole WOTUS thing going forward? There's a lot of interest in this issue right now, Jim.
Oh yeah, usually the Supreme Court will hold cases closer to when they're going to end their session, which is June, on any controversial decision, and you'd have to say this is controversial. So we should get Proposition 12 before WOTUS. If we don't, then that's a surprise. But as far as timing of any announcement, I've given up. You can quote some pretty good people, and they're just not accurate. No one knows when they're going to come out.
Right. Okay. On Wednesday, President Biden will co-host the Second Summit for Democracy. It's a virtual gathering of world leaders. How much attention is this going to get, Jim?
Well, not much, I don't think. But, this goes into this heady situation, Chip, because look at This is on the time when in Israel, Netanyahu fired his defense minister
Mhm.
for speaking out against the proposed reform to Israel's judiciary.
Right.
So that smacks of something to watch out for. But this goes into my thing where the world is picking sides, and again, very, very important stuff to me as a foreign policy watcher.
Okay. We get ag data this week. We get key economic data, and as important as the prospective plannings report and the quarterly grain stocks report is, Friday's personal income and expenditures for February might inch it out on the importance level because of the impact it will have at the Fed.
Oh, definitely, especially the Fed's favorite stat is coming out Friday
Right.
as well.
Personal income and
Personal income,
expenditures. Yeah.
yeah, CPE, or PCE, and absolutely that'll set the tone, I think, for the next FOMC meeting, Chip. And I just see myself, I see the Fed on hold for a while here. And as far as agriculture, Thursday is the hogs and pigs report, and then Friday are the grain stocks report and the prospective plannings report.
Right.
And you think the corn soybean price spread is favoring corn, is it not?
A touch, yes.
Okay.
The ratio fell back on Friday to 2.27 to 1, so not really anymore.
Okay.
It was up to about 2.41, 2.42, which would have favored corn just a touch, but anymore, nah, not really.
Okay. I know Pro Farmer released their survey to the members. Corn acres expected to rise, nearly 4%. Soybean acres virtually unchanged.
Yeah. Excuse me. I was wrong on that. When it was up at 2.4, 2.41 to 1, it was starting to favor soybeans. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But as it falls back, it may be putting a little bit more incentive back over to corn. But to provide a lot of incentive to move some acres, especially at this time of the year, it's got to be very close to 2 to 1. And I just don't. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. DA has hit us with a list of comments here. I'm going to hit them here real quick. The resources war is not just about corn, beef, and soy. Farmers need to feed USA and not China's economy? Question mark. The 100-mile rule. We need to eat local food. CSA, food close to you. Find a farmer's market, people. Absolutely. I love a farmer's market. The Mennonite girls up at Guttenberg make the best dadgum pies that they're delicious. I love a good farmer's market. I agree. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for a huge percentage of the population.
Yeah, well, I'm gifted out here. We have more than a few. And in fact, this probably is true in Iowa, Chip. You can subscribe to the farmer's market where they bring it to you.
Yeah.
On a rotating basis. I have that as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Works really well for that. That does work well. And but like I said, there's a lot of people that just simply don't have access to it. So
but again,
we can't forget about the production agriculture is what I'm saying.
No. And a growing number of restaurants around this country use the local food as well whenever they can. So those are good, trends. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Hey, I know an old hog house right now that's growing lettuce. Okay. And that's for the local restaurants.
Yes.
Within a 50-mile radius of where they're growing it. So, I mean, hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for the local food sources. We just can't expect to feed the world with that structure. What else, Jim? We're down to about the last 5 minutes here. What else do we need to really hit on?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. There's so much going on again. We handled the banks. Oh, we've got Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashari, I guess.
Yep.
Said the recent bank turmoil has increased the risk of a U.S. recession. So we're back to that. I noticed Saudi Aramco announced several moves that they're taking a stake in a giant oil complex, and that followed landmark deal with Chinese partners to build a huge refining and petrochemical complex. So again, we're seeing a lot of linkages here as we get into different markets, Chip. And
Yeah.
from the transportation side, retailers are reaping big savings on reduced ocean transport costs. That should aid in export market development. You had a group of more than 200 importers, exporters, and logistic officials urging President Biden to speed up the West Coast port labor.
There you go. I wanted
Talks.
to get there.
That's one that we should note, because that's lingering, and they want
Volume's going down at those ports right now, isn't it? I mean, it looks like the workers have started to slow down their efforts.
Absolutely, and they want Biden to announce a replacement, a new point person, if you will, now that Labor Secretary Marty Walsh has left his post. So we've seen before, so these port labor talks can get into the market very, very fast if they're not resolved.
As long as we're talking about that possibility, let's not forget that it is that time of the year once again when we should be watching for a Brazilian dock workers strike. They are going to try to figure out how to get the biggest bean crop the world has ever grown through an export system. And while they've made improvements to that export system, it's still going to put a lot of stress on it. And the bean market down there is already starting to show some of the effects. The basis has just completely fallen apart in that Brazilian bean. And you know what? It's not that was not expected. It's just that now that it's happening, the reality is really starting to set in.
Yep. And, Chip, we had another letter, coalition of 350 businesses told lawmakers in a letter this morning, so it's fresh, that the, quote, broken permitting system is holding back infrastructure development. So you can throw billions of dollars at infrastructure, but if you have the regulatory side in the permitting side awry, you're going to have a glitch. And apparently that's happening across the U.S.
Right. Okay. One last comment from Gary here. Looked at my relock interest rates, 9.5%. I'm holding off machinery purchases this year. It sounds like the Fed indicated one more interest rate increase, quarter point interest rate increase, and then a pause after that. That was after last week's FOMC meeting. Jim, is that kind of the read that you're getting?
Yeah, but I think they probably should pause and then maybe increase later. But that's just me. I mean, what's the difference of 25 basis points? But you're into that 5.25 area, I guess. And then but we still have inflation around 6%, right?
Yeah.
And,
well, we're going to find out this week.
Yeah, and usually the Fed likes the Fed funds rate 2 percentage points higher than the inflation rate.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're getting up there, and it will impact machinery purchases. To me,
certainly should.
History, yeah.
Yep.
Odds they go down on the rate. No, not with inflation. They would be saying the banking crisis is worse than the inflation. And at the beginning of the program, we indicated that at least we're breathing a little easier on the banking crisis. So I would never say zero rates in anything in this town, but the odds are that they're not going to cut.
Right. I would agree with that, at least not in 2023. The attitude could change very quickly, though. I mean, they've indicated that their decision-making process has been data-driven to this point, and they're going to continue to focus on the data as it comes in. I'm not saying that they've done the best job of interpreting the data, but they're going to continue to look at the data as it comes in and use that in making their decisions. So
yeah, and USDA did go down late last week on food prices, but not a lot, but they did go down. So the trend is there, but not enough, I don't think, to convince the Fed. DA noted that weaponizing access to food is unconscionable, expensive, starvation is a war crime.
It's true.
That won't stop Putin,
right?
Because he's seeing that he tried to use energy as a weapon, and now he's using food as a weapon.
Yep,
Just-
absolutely. Okay. Hey, this morning on AgriTalk, thank you, Jim. This morning on AgriTalk, Machinery Pete, Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa, and Iowa State Representative Chad Ingalls. Chad represents District 68 in Iowa. He's going to be talking about land rights issues generated by the development of those CO2 pipelines. So we're going to be getting into that. And then this afternoon, we're going to go big picture conversation with Bill Baruch from Blue Line Futures. Have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.